Good morning, I'm Pastor Havila Forgi, and I'm so glad to welcome you, not exactly virtually to Mount Cross this morning, but virtually to the lovely forest of Gig Harbor, where I am doing a little bit of catch up for writing and studying this morning. But I still had some important things to share with you this morning. We have been a lot this summer in the book of Acts, and one of the things that is of historical importance throughout the Bible is God's great concern with corrupt religious leaders. And the book of Acts is no different. We've had several texts in a row now that deal with the Sanhedrin court, which was a court led by religious leaders that was kind of notorious for shutting down any voices that were in opposition with the ways that they held power. And Jesus had called them and other religious leaders some extremely pejorative terms, like whitewashed tombs, saying that they looked all pretty on the outside, but inside they were absolutely corrupt. Jesus said that they were putting horrible, oppressive requirements on people that they were not willing to abide by themselves, and that this was a huge problem. And a lot of other issues were happening with this specific group of religious leaders at the time. Now the problem with these in real time texts about individual humans is that some of these scriptures and acts have been used as clobber verses to support anti-Semitism, as if somehow the Jewish people in a whole were represented by these few corrupt religious leaders. And let me just say, please, God, don't let Christians as a whole be represented by some extremely corrupt religious leaders. So I would just like to spend a moment talking about some other places in the Old Testament where God's concern about corrupt religious leaders really pops up, and then places that it has popped up and been fought against after our canon texts. So first, there are the sons of Eli. Eli was a great priest, absolutely held up, but his sons were said to have no regard for the Lord. They exploited their position by taking the best portions of sacrifices, engaging in immoral behavior. And this is clearly during the time before the New Testament. Priests in Jeremiah's time, the prophet Jeremiah condemned the priests of his time for corruption, accused them of failing to uphold justice, just like Jesus accused the Sanhedrin court. Again, the prophet Micah, and this is something that that God has prophets do over and over again. Micah denounced religious leaders of his time for corruption, noting that they were using bribes or taking bribes, and the priests would teach for money and the prophets would tell fortunes for profit. This is bad stuff. And again, Ezekiel condemned the priests for failing to distinguish between a life lived for God and a life not lived for God. So moving just forward a little bit in time, or a lot, 1,500 years after these accusations of the Sanhedrin court, Martin Luther became extremely frustrated and angry at the Catholic Church for the same kind of corruption. The practice of selling indulgences was, in Luther's view, a perversion of Christian teachings and a way for the church to exploit people's fear of hell for financial gain and their love of their family members. And they would say, spend this money and that'll guarantee the salvation of your loved ones. Absolute corruption in the Catholic Church at that time. Finally, I just want to lift up the ways that corruption in religious leaders have has really hurt both the church and broader society in my lifetime, at the very least. Sexual abuse is a real thing in the church where people have power, and that power goes unchecked or unquestioned. There are so many examples of financial misconduct or abuse where people will say, pay your seed money and then your prayers will be answered. That's so similar to indulgences. The ways that churches can become hierarchical and have centralized power that silences other voices. This is a thing happening in the Christian church today that directly parallels the Sanhedrin court. And finally, then something that we all know about, at least right now, is when we have state involvement and intertwined interests and partnerships between the church and empire. It's happening right here now. It's happened in the time of the Crusades. It has happened over and over again. So I would just like, because I haven't had space for the rabbit warren in my sermons, as every time these condemnations of particularly the Sanhedrin court come up in the book of Acts, that I hope it is obvious to all of us that God loves the Jewish people. Jesus was a Jewish person, and God's love for this particular group of humans is unchanged at this time. But God always has great concern and condemnation for people who use their positions of religious leadership to exploit or to power grab or for financial gain or to silence questions and oppositions. So that's something for us to think about as we finish our series in Acts. I think we're at the end of the let's go after the Sanhedrin passages. But I would suggest that the Sanhedrin court in these passages is absolutely not a stand-in for the Jewish people as a whole, but they are a stand-in for the ways that we should take on corruption in every religious leader, large or small. Thanks for listening to my soapbox. I hope that you have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.